I'm the third generation here in Shinagaon. My grandfather, he was the same name as myself. He was Con O'Leary. Neil is the short for that. And he came from the townland of Coolin Leman, just across the river to Inchinagown. And my father was Harry O'Leary. He was here before me, and I'm the third, and my son Darren now will be the fourth generation. Well, I went to school when I was 6, of course, and everyone, that was the age they went there at. When I was 13 and a half, I was finished at 13, I suppose, in Cumhola School, and my father wasn't well at the time. He was going for a serious hernia operation, which he carried for 17 or 18 years. And like the news wasn't great at the time. And but he came through, thankfully. And but I stayed at home from school. Then I didn't go to any post-primary. And I don't think I regretted it, to be quite honest. I was very, very interested in the farming, particularly the sheep, but the cattle also. And I stayed at home, and I have been at home since. We'd have neighbours there, maybe 7 or 8 of them in the bog. We had a bog in the townland of Cale 9, and a rented bog. And we would have what I call mills, is a group of 7 or 8 local people would all come together. And my uncle would, of course, we used to invite, we were young, we'd be spreading out the turf. We were too young for the Guinness. They'd be going to the pub and bringing bottles of Guinness to the neighbours, and they'd have big chats about going back to the early 20s and things like that, and the history of Ireland and so on. Like, there'd be huge discussion go on over a few bottles of Guinness, and maybe a few bottles of tea as well.
The area would have been very, very quiet. We wouldn't have seen many people at all, from week to week. Going to Mass would have been the highlight, really. Every Sunday, that's when we'd see people. It was quite primitive. When I went to school, there was only one car inside in the neighbourhood. I started working when I was 14. Actually, before that, I was at a rain dance, Christmas Eve. No, not Christmas Eve, sorry. It was New Year's Eve. And I was only 14, and I actually had some alcohol, and I fell down over a bank, and I broke my elbow, and it was in a plaster, so I could not go to school because I was going on the bus. Everyone would be hitting up against you, so I gave up school. And then I got a job as a hall porter in Ballylkey House on that April. And my elbow was like this. It wouldn't straighten. The doctor said it would never straighten. And with drawing the cases, it just straightened out. So I worked there then for a season. And then some friends of mine, they went off to London. And then I always didn't really want to stay around. And at the time, everybody was nearly going off to London, really. So I headed off to London. That was in April 1983. And I got a job in London in the buildings. I went over on the Sunday, went over to Kilburn to a few of my mates, and we went down to this pub called the Roman Way. And actually I knew nearly everyone inside the pub. They were all from Kirkle, from Glengariff. I actually knew more in the pub than what I would know nearly in the Ovan, which was amazing. And so I enjoyed London. I worked there for 4 years.
I was 19 when I first came to Ireland. Well, when I was at home in Essex, I always used to love the countryside. That was the thing that kind of sustained me, and going for walks in the woods and the countryside and nature. And so I kind of wanted to get away from London and what I saw as this cancerous blight that the human race was sort of inflicting on the planet. Like I said, my grandparents lived in Devon, and I used to go there on holidays, and I thought, well, Devon's nice, So Ireland must be nicer, you know, because my logic was the further southwest you go, the nicer it gets. And my mum was a health visitor, and a lot of the people, her colleagues, were Irish people. And they all said, oh, Catherine would love it, you know, because they all knew I was half mad and used to go around Brentwood High Street on my pony and was all into sort of getting away from the modern world, you know, leaving the 20th century behind. They were like, oh, she'd love it, she'd love it. So anyway, I went on holiday to Ireland and met up with the hippies, and it was like my dream, you know, to go and get away from the 20th century and not have any money, and to get your water from the well and gather your sticks and light a fire and grow your own vegetables and spin your own wool and all that kind of thing. And I met these people who were already doing what I thought would be fun to do, and they said, oh, well, you can come and join us if you want, because they bought a farm. And I suppose it would be a bit like a woofer would be nowadays, you know, it was sort of, they wanted extra people to share their dream, and they had a kind of dream of a kind of like a little village where everyone would have their own space to live, but you would share the jobs and share the food and sort of have a communal kind of lifestyle, but then with everyone with their own separate space. And I think at the time we kind of felt we were pioneers, you know, but in retrospect we were probably just spoilt middle class people who were sort of having fun. But at the time we were very earnest about it and had these very strong principles about you couldn't use anything modern, you know, everything had to be primitive.
I remember coming over when I was, 22, I think, 1973, and it was a bit of a pilgrimage for me, and I came on my own, and I got the ferry, hitchhiked down from London where I was living, got the ferry from Wales, and stayed with the friends who had moved here about 2 years before and bought an acre, an old farmhouse. We were there for about a month staying with these people, and I absolutely loved it. I thought, this is the life, this is a wonderful, simple life, and there were lots of other blow-ins. We didn't know them as blow-ins in those days, but what I came to know as blow-ins, and lots of other people like myself, and the same kind of way of life and interests, and there were parties up there, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought, this is where I want to live. So I planned to come back to live here, but I didn't have any money, and I thought, well, I'll have to go back to England and earn some money.
Yeah, I was a city dweller, yeah. And from 90 on we came over and felt very attracted by the place. So yeah, we thought, or I should talk for myself, I felt very much welcome. I did like the landscape. Weather's not always enjoyable, of course. And I was also attracted by the people, of the reaction of the people. So comparing to Germany, I don't like the overcrowding and the pressure. I felt a lot of pressure in Germany. So slowly we were planning to buy something here. We had to think about, or we did think about Connemara or Southwest. And we decided for the Southwest because we are coming out of a city area. So we did like to have access to Cork, what is similar to Darmstadt. And that was 94. We came over and said, okay, now we look around. So we did visit nearly every auctioneer from Skibbereen over to Kinmare. 4 weeks, we were wrecked. The mood was bad. We gave it nearly up because we were looking for a property where we could live, not a holiday property. We got offered quite a lot of holiday properties, but we did like to have something with space and so on. So, and that sounds now like a story, but that was reality. We gave it up, literally, but we missed one auctioneer, Paddy Brick, in Bantry. And then he said, there's something in the mountains, and his son could show us the place. And so we came to that place and said, okay, it's just that what we are looking for. So we have access to Bantry, we got access more or less to Cork, we got space around, and that's how it did go on.
Well, the first house that I really remember settling in myself was up in Derrydove, and it was what you would consider a derelict house, really. I mean, the roof didn't leak, but the upstairs wasn't habitable because it just was an old slate roof, and the underside of the slate had just been rendered, which I think was the traditional way of sealing it before they could afford ceiling boards and things. And all the render was kind of falling off, so it was, you couldn't use the upstairs, so we just lived in the ground floor. And it was a beautiful, beautiful house. It had big original flagstone floor and a cobbled hearth, and all the original furniture was in the house, the original press and dresser and settle. And it was all painted, all the old paint was still on it, and it was this lovely flat green, and it was a really beautiful house, but very, very dark and almost a little bit like a cave. But I think it was an unusual house, I think, because it had a kind of feeling of grandeur about it, and it was in this lovely spot. It was sort of on a rock looking out over the most fabulous view of all the rolling hills. As far as the eye could see, you could see hills kind of thing. But it was like living on the moon, really. And I mean, and I was so idealistic. It was like there was nothing in the house. It was like nothing. You weren't allowed to, it was like the rules were I couldn't own anything unless it was beautiful and essential, So it was like, let's say, like the tin bucket, enamel bowl, the wooden bowl to eat out of, and the wooden plates, and very, very minimal. It was a bit like you weren't allowed to have possessions, So it was very, very bleak, really, and barren, the landscape in those days. And it was sort of, the house was freezing cold. Like, if the weather was cold, and it was big, beautiful open fire, I mean, gorgeous, and you'd light this massive fire, and your front half would be burning. And I did find it, even though I loved it on the one hand, I think it didn't really agree with me. I think I did suffer from depression, really, living there.
I didn't come back until I was with who became my husband, and I had my first child, and she was 4 months old. And it was the friends that I'd originally stayed with was his sister and her partner. But they fell out anyway. He fell out with them after a few days, so we had to leave. Anyway, some other, what we'll call hippies, took pity on us, and they had her father had a house that he wasn't living in, so they let us have that for a while. But it had this place. I was there on my own. My husband would go off and work for local farmers. I was really isolated. It was pretty grim, actually. And anyway, we moved from that house into another house, which was bigger. There was no road to this house, and by then I had 2 children. I had another daughter, so they were about 18 months apart. Both in cloth nappies, no running water, washing nappies, boiling them over the fire, cooking over the fire, no electricity. It was really hard, really hard. And although I had lived in Italy a few years before then with people my own age, no children, no babies, cooking on the fire, no electricity, in Tuscany, it was a very different scenario, and I think I realised quite quickly how different it was here. It was grim, and again, my husband, we didn't get on at all well, I have to say, and I just felt really trapped and felt, I was just doing my best for the children, but it was very difficult. And I didn't really know anybody. I had one friend, this old friend that I'd met, but she lived a long way away and I had no way to get there. On my first daughter, Holly, her first birthday, this friend turned up anyway, and with the horse and cart, and we went off and had an adventure. And we went to visit this other friend who lived, at that time they were doing up a house, and they lived in a cow barn. And she had a little son, and they had I remember it was tiny, and it had a rock at the door, which instead of getting rid of the rock, he'd made the door kind of fit the rock, so it was this massive draft coming through. And anyway, it was so lovely. I'll never forget that evening. So there was fun, but for me, I know I would have coped with all that hardship if I'd have had more access to women friends.
So 2000, we did start to make plans for the house, the drawings and so on, got people in to prepare the place. We are looking for a local builder, quite interesting time. It was quite interesting time, and that was just when the time when building and the property bubble picked up. We found a local builder and did a great job. 2002, we were a few months here. At the end, when they were building in here, everything was ripped apart. The water was running down the walls, and we were living in the one room which was left over there. Yeah. And farming is one of our main income. It's not our full-time living, but it's our main income and keeps us busy. And sometimes we enjoy it, and sometimes lemming time it's raining, stormy, rainy nights and so on, something goes wrong, we think, oh, we don't need it anymore.
Then outside people started coming in, and I noticed they were sort of coming with big flouncy dresses, lovely colours, and some of them had lovely curly hair, more with dreadlocks, sandals, things normally I didn't see every day around. And of course we were curious as to where they'd be going, and then they'd ask me where was such a house or a field or a road. But I didn't know the names of any of the places around, so of course Teddy had to be called about 20 times a week, where is this place and that place, I didn't really know. So then they'd come, settle down, come back down to the shop, get whatever they wanted, and sometimes there'd be friends outside waiting outside the door, and I'd often look out and they'd be doing stretches, like hands out, bending. I thought they were all crazy. Really, I did. Doing all breathing, that was a big thing as well. I remember all that because from thinking about it now, we go to yoga and all those sorts of stuff, and we have to pay a big lot of money for it. So I think they were there 40 years ago when I came. They were really doing all this, and we didn't realise what it was. We just thought it was something crazy. So if it was, we were all crazy.
I obviously stood out. I would have been I would have cut a different dash here than most local people, I suppose. But, I wore Wellingtons all the time and had long skirts and long hair down to my waist, which was usually in plaits to keep it out of the midst of the children.
They seemed to be carefree, easygoing, but yet they always seemed happy. And I think a lot of it, like what we were trying to get away from here at the time, was, I suppose, we thought, really, you could say, the poverty as such, like they were going for that. They were coming from having everything and they were going back to basics, whereas at the time we were trying to get away from that. So it was kind of intriguing to see that. And like they were all, I suppose, like they were all young. Some of the women were just beautiful, like, and I thought, what the heck are they doing here? And they were always happy. And then I remember a few times they came to say, oh, what a beautiful place you've got here. And I just couldn't see it at the time. And I thought, oh, whatever they're on, I'd like to be on it. No, but yeah, it was, yeah, I just found all of them very nice, very interesting. And they were just, yeah, they had a different way of looking at things. I suppose a lot of the times when we grew up, a lot of people would kind of moan and complain about the weather. They'd moan about this and that, but they were saying, oh, it's lovely, the rain is lovely, it's nice and soft, where we'd be moaning and groaning about the muck and the shit and all that, like, whereas they seemed to love it. And then I think another thing, they were interested in a lot of the stuff that that a lot of people were throwing out and things. The old pots, the old pans. They thought it was great. The dung, they were bringing dung in the back of the car in bags. And we thought they were crazy. Where it was just piled up in a heap here.
The people were suspicious of them, of course, because they didn't know the background to them, like they were wondering who these people were. Some were very quiet and maybe didn't mix very well. Others mixed great, and some are there now. I suppose we have them up to 40 years here. I suppose there were also a lot of more young people into the area, and we had a lot of old people living alone here, and you know, they chatted with them, and they were very interested in listening to the old people, telling them what happened and the way Ireland was in their young time. I think they livened up the area by being living here and contributing, like, you know, to communities and being involved in many ways. I think they certainly contributed. Like, a lot of them came because they liked the area, you know, the landscape, the scenery. What they did and what they brought to the area was, I suppose, a lot of some of the local families, they died out of the area, and there was nobody to take over particularly the homestead. Maybe the farm was bought by a local person, but there was an extra house there, and they bought that. And some of them never minded being out a distance and access and things. It was no problem to them. The more remote, the more some of them liked it. And I suppose they created the extra light in a dark place. Like, you know, there was a light there, and where there's light, there's life.
We had a nice vegetable garden, and so I could grow vegetables there, which is something I learnt to do when I lived here. I was always into whole food diet, and we had a little co-op really of whole foods, so it was, you know, easy. We could weigh up your own brown rice and beans and things like this. But then some friends of mine opened the first whole food shop in Bantry, and it was called Rainbow Emporium. And these friends of mine and myself, we thought, well, we'd like to do a whole food cafe. So we did it over the top in Bantry, off the square there, over the top of this whole food shop, and we called it Over the Rainbow, because it was over the Rainbow Emporium. And I loved it. I had it for a year. It kind of dissolved. It sort of didn't really work. It was a bit before its time. It was all organic vegetables. We had soup, salads, cakes, things like that. Now, because it was kind of before its time, there is a fabulous whole food cafe now in Bantry and whole food shop, absolutely brilliant. And everybody uses it. You can go in there and you'll see the guards having their lunch in there at lunchtime, and, you know, it's everybody. It isn't just the hippies. But when we had our cafe, as I say, it was mainly the local people didn't come in there a couple of people did, but not that many. And mostly it was just hippies, and you can't really survive on hippies alone.
When I was young, I was really high principled, and it was all, like I say, quite black and white, and, you know, it was very strict. And as the years went by, I've kind of felt quite like I was going against the tide. And I think at a certain point, especially when I had children, and then I kind of realised, actually, this pretending to be a bloody peasant, suddenly I actually didn't have any money. I had 2 children. I didn't have any mod cons, and I did actually make a bit of a U-turn. I was a bit like, oh, I think I might drop back in again and have a washing machine, and I wouldn't mind a continental holiday and a nice car, and this is a bit like boring, actually, spending all day washing clothes and bringing turf in and taking ashes out and cooking potatoes and all this, baking bastable bread is all very romantic. But with 2 children, suddenly I didn't like it anymore, so I sort of did kind of decide to work and make money, and I sort of started off just cleaning houses for people, and then I gradually got into doing gardening, because I thought, well, I'm not very good at cleaning houses, so I'm better at gardening. So I sort of turned into a gardener, and I wanted a nice house, and that was when I moved down to Ballylickey. So I did sort of do a kind of a turnaround, and for a few years I was definitely quite materialistic, and I suppose a bit hungry from all the years that, even though I was brought up wealthy, I had kind of deprived myself so I think for a few years I was kind of hungry and wanted everything. And then actually I then went through a phase where I thought, oh, it's a bit hollow, all this, you know, it's almost like I went through the whole process all over again of sort of re-evaluating what's important. And I kind of became less materialistic again in a way, and started to sort of want to grow my own vegetables, and I just felt I needed that connection with why I'd come here, and having that life should have a bit more meaning, and that I should eat organic food, and that, you know, wanting to make life simpler again and go back to basics again. And then at a certain point I inherited quite a lot of money from all my family in England, and I built this lovely house, and I did feel a bit like, oh, this is a bit embarrassing because it's all a bit bourgeois, and I was almost quite ashamed when I first built the house that I'd sort of let the side down. But I mean, now I'm delighted because I've got a lovely, cosy, comfortable house, and in this gorgeous spot and everything.
They would have had a big influence on me because I seen, I suppose, a different lifestyle that they had. I always kind of had an interest in alternative stuff like the yoga, the meditation, and then one Christmas time, Susan actually bought me like a gift voucher of 10 yoga classes, and I went, and I just, you know, most of the time I was the only man there, but it didn't really faze me. I was okay about it, and they seemed okay with me, which was good. And I just loved it. And I've been doing, that's about 13 years ago. And I just love it. It is all, nearly most of the teachers I know of, most of them are really outsiders. They're blow-ins, really. I don't really know many local teachers.
Our youngest, no, not our youngest, sorry, our first child, she had eczema a little bit, not too much, and I got lots of stuff for her and didn't do any good, but somebody suggested then we get a goat. And there was a young girl over the road who was probably leaving. She'd only just come a few months, and you know, she just wanted to leave again, but she had a goat with a lovely bell hanging and everything. So Teddy went off in his Mini, and they put the goat in, himself and a friend.
Like I said, all I had was a Mini at the time, and getting a goat in to a Mini, like behind into the back seat, like was no mean achievement, you know. So we arrived down, like Rita said, and we were milking the goat from behind, which is the way you milk a goat. But every time we attempted to milk the goat, she sat down, literally sat down. She just knew that, you know, she wasn't used to us really, you know. Nature is unbelievable, you know. So we didn't succeed in getting one drop of milk from the goat until the lady that owned it her came. But it was a very nice thing for her to offer the goat, because goat's milk is supposed to be good for rashes and all that kind of thing. So it was a very nice human thing to do, you know.
I'd be there on my own a lot with the children, and again I did find the isolation very difficult, and the neighbours in the community in Gortlucre were lovely, but there were a lot of either very elderly people who were great, and then there was also this pattern of the sort of old ageing mum with the bachelor son who's already maybe 50, you know, so he wasn't going to get married. And I suppose the local people were my saving grace because they were lovely. I mean, they're probably mainly all dead now, but they were sort of, there was Paddy and Rita Cronin, and they would just, oh, come in and have the tea, and there'd always be the chat, and they loved the children. And then again there were the Don Vats down the road, and I think they're all dead now as well. And there was 2 brothers and a sister, none of them had ever married, you know, and they were delighted to see young people around, and you know, they were really supportive and really generous, and they sort of, I think, kind of looked after me really. Oh, I found that the very old people were great because they all the young people at that particular time in the early 70s and the mid 70s, there really weren't very many young people in this area because, like a lot of mountainy areas all around the world, the young people leave because there's no work, there's, you know, the life is really tough, there's no stimulation, there's nothing happening. So they would all leave, either leave the country or go off to the cities. And so the really old people were delighted to see young people coming in, and we were all really interested in, you know, how do you make a lazy bed, and how do you grow this, and how do you do that, and how do you bake a loaf of bread in the Bastable, and, you know, and we'd sort of buy all their old kind of oil lamps and harness and bits and bobs that we were really excited about, all this really old, genuine old, to them it was like their old rubbish that was hanging about in the shed, you know. So in a way it was a great relationship. It's like a match made in heaven in a way, because they were sort of, you know, suddenly there's these young people. And afterwards I thought, God, I was so quick to leave that valley, you know. It's like they really welcomed us and, you know, were really good to us. And to them it was quite special that we'd moved into their valley. And after a few years I left, and I never even gave a backward glance. And yet to those people, you know, they welcomed us into their lives, you know. It's funny. And whereas to me it was a bit like I was just so in the present moment, oh, this is what I'm doing now. And I don't think I'd ever really been brought up, because I'd been brought up in this very nuclear family. I don't think I'd ever thought about caring for other people in the community, or, do you know, it was, I did feel kind of, when I got older and I look back, I thought, oh God, I should have kept in touch with them or visited them, or, you know, because they'd been so good to us, really, so generous. And I mean, they weren't wealthy people, but they would always give you anything they could give you, you know, whether it was spuds or turf or advice or help or crack, you know, company, entertainment. No, they were, that older generation were lovely, whereas I think the younger people who were closer to us in age, there weren't many of them around, but they were so rejecting of anything old. They really wanted the modern stuff, and we'd rejected all the modern stuff, so we were a bit like ships that passed in the night, you know. We were kind of both going in opposite directions. So even though, you know, they were superficially friendly, there was really not much connection. It was more the really old people that made the connection with us.
For our wedding now, everybody in the area was asked. So we're just one community. So they danced at our wedding, and I was delighted. We were all there together. And even since now, we've had stations and everything. So, which is the house mass, it's a traditional thing in the area. We'd have always made sure everybody in the area was always asked. So yeah, so there was always a community spirit like that. And it's even, the wedding presents we got would have been unusual. Like say one person now in the area, say, that would have been from up the country. You know, it was a different present. It wasn't a hairdryer, it wasn't an electric thing. He gave me wax candles, which was beautiful, and a kind of a holder, which is something maybe somebody else around the area would be thinking something more practical. But his present was unique to him, and I really liked it, and I still have that candle.
I've always really valued my relationships with the local people, and I think when I was young and I first came over, I probably, you know, I just took, it was all just, they were all really friendly, and they'd invite you for tea and you'd eat all around you, and I can imagine them afterwards going, oh my God, Jesus, yet a week's food, you know. But they were always really friendly. And then I think when I settled and bought a property, I kind of wanted to integrate, and I was mad to integrate, and I was always really frustrated that I couldn't integrate, and I was always trying to integrate. And then I think after a while I realised, well, most of my support system and a lot of my good friends were actually in the blow-in community. So I think when I got to about 40, I kind of gave up. I thought, oh, I'm just going to give up with all this integrating and not integrating, and am I accepted or amn't I accepted? I'll just be myself. I'll hang out with whoever I want to hang out with. And I somehow found that I actually got on better with the local people after that, because I suppose I wasn't, you know, I was just being myself, which I suppose in life is the secret of success, the more you're yourself. And I found that I've got, as the years have gone on, I've got more and more really good friends in the local community.
Another neighbour, I met her in the post office actually, and I said she's an elderly lady, she's in her 80s, we knew her years ago. And I said, oh, I'm coming back to live full time. And she started to cry. Tears came out of her eyes. I couldn't believe it. She was so happy. She said, Dee, you've made my day. And I suppose I didn't realise perhaps how people viewed me here. Maybe I didn't really feel perhaps that I belonged, or I don't really know. But it really, really made an impression on me. And I see a lot of her. She comes up to see us here. We go and see her. In fact, we just planted out her greenhouse for her and got some plants going for her in there. She's a lovely woman, lovely family. And, you know, that's just really heartwarming.
Farming came to us through the place. Then we had one neighbor very much encouraging us. And that's how we came to farming. Sheep were the decision because you don't need to build very expensive houses. The land suits more to sheep. The farm is not that big. And sheep we could handle. And so step by step we learned how to deal with sheep. It was a hard time. And I would say without the help of neighbors, maybe we would have given it up. Because we learned all the bad stories, what can happen with animals and illness and animals die and all these things. Without the help, the encouragement and got taught by neighbors, I think we wouldn't be that happy today, or we might have given it up totally. And that's how we came to farming. Integrated in the community, I feel very good. I'm part of the community group and I see people asking me, we help each other, what I like, some more, some less. So for that I feel quite integrated. I'm aware of a fact, we didn't grow up here. We moved over, I was nearly 50. What we miss is the whole part growing up, bringing up our own children, there's a big part we miss. And we're not member of the church and not member of the GAA. That are, I think, the church and the GAA are two very, very binding things for the locals.
It's nice to think that the Cumhola area here, that there are our school numbers are keeping up great, and it is people that come in here.
Like driving down the road, I might meet a neighbour now that would have, I won't mention any names, but he might have had a catch of fish. And he'd say to me, "Anne, would you like some fish?" And I'd say, "I would love some fish. And when I have lamb, I'll remember you and I'll give you some lamb." That kind of thing. So it's comradeship as well. The door is always open.
I just find them all very interesting. A lot of them are into meditation, they're into yoga, they're into organic gardening. I find them quite broad-minded, a lot of them. They're more open, they're more open to different things, which I really like. Yeah, I would say they're very, very good friends.
I still identify with that. I do identify with it, yeah. And to me, it's something to be proud of, because I feel like, it was the ideals and the feelings we had at the time in the sort of early 70s, and everyone was a bit like, are all now really mainstream, like this really caring about how food is produced, that it should be organic and that it should be good quality, and worrying about global warming and pollution, and being concerned about, politicians and the corruption and all these things that we would go banging on about have become just mainstream. There is something valid in our choice, that actually I'd rather have the personal freedom than the things. But I suppose it was a product of prosperity. It's not something probably very poor people would have done. It's definitely a product. We were sort of the post-war baby boomers, and it was like in the 50s in England, it was like never had it so good, and this sort of time of plenty. So it's like we were rejecting plenty, whereas, so in retrospect. But I think there is something very genuine about it, that we, and actually a lot of people have managed to create, because of luck really, that we came at a time when property was very cheap and there was an awful lot of property available. So we were able to pick really nice spots. And then a lot of people started off sort of very idealistic and then gradually realised, well, we've got children now, we do need money. And a lot of people have created interesting businesses and, you know, that have still been true to their ideals. You know, like one of my friends generates electricity, you know, and then other people would be carpenters, and you know, a lot of people have sort of used their ideals and their interests, and, you know, like setting up a whole food shop or setting up a nursery to grow successful businesses, which then the next generation have been able to carry on.
Home is Camola.
Home. Well, of course, I'm a Brit and I was born in the UK, and I lived there for the first 20-something years of my life, and then I came here for about 20 years. Then I went back for almost 20 years, but I've come home. This is home to me. In a way, I never really felt like I went away. That's the odd thing, and I really feel that now. It is really home.
Well, home is here now in Coolin Lamon, Camola.
Well, home is here, and for me, is home here in Inchinagown. I'm 63 years of age. I never left it, and I'm very, very happy here.
I don't feel really isolated here because there's a nice community of people, you know, my local neighbours, and then a lot of blow-ins and just a mix of people around. So I do feel very much at home here in Camola.
Home for me, it's definitely now Ireland. I'm born in Germany and my roots are in Germany, but not my emotional roots. In Germany, I never felt strong belong to Germany. I feel as a European. But moving over here was the first time that I had experienced, get a feeling, an emotional binding to a country. That's how I feel. I feel home here. Will it be forever be my home? I don't know. I don't know what future brings. But even there are always things you don't like. You're not always feeling that happy, or could be a bad experience with somebody, or we had 2 summers we thought we can't cope anymore with it. But then I can't see an alternative, a better place. Where should we move? It's for us. It's just great. We got to manage our area here. We got a garden. We got space, and we got a lot of freedom to live our life. It's definitely home. Yeah, it's definitely home.